Thank you, Mike, and good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be with you, and thank you for coming this afternoon. So we're going to consider then the subject of Jerusalem, future world capital, and consider what the Bible has to say about this great city. So we're going to consider it basically in three parts. We're going to think about Judah as it stands today. We're going to think about Jerusalem as it was in history, and then the main part of our talk will consider what the Bible tells us will be the future of this city. So Jerusalem today, well, where is it? I've got on there a map of Europe and part of Asia. You'll see that we are sort of here, and then come down here, and then Jerusalem is in the land of Israel, about where that red dot is on the screen there. And then if we zoom in a little bit closer, and this is Israel and I suppose what we know as the West Bank today, and you'll see Jerusalem there, again just under that red dot. Okay, so it's a city in Palestine and in the West Bank, and it's got a variety of people living in there. Now these figures aren't exactly up to date, I'm not sure when they're from. The population approximately 801,000, and then it's made up of three main religious groups. You've got Jewish as a percentage of 64%, Muslims about half that, exactly half that, at 32%, and then Christians at 2%, and then the mathematicians amongst you will have realised that's not quite 100, and so there is a further 2% who don't fit into any of those three categories. So those are the three major religious groups who are living in Jerusalem. But all three of these groups see Jerusalem as being a significant place for them. So the Jewish faith, Islam and the Christians all believe Jerusalem to be a special place, a special city. And we'll see this afternoon from the Bible why that is. But it's also a significant political place. We saw from the slide earlier on that this area is divided up into two sections. There is the area of Israel, and there is the Palestinian territories, the area of the West Bank. And you'll see here, again if I just put my finger on here, you'll see Jerusalem is right on the border with Israel and the West Bank. And both of those two groups of people see Jerusalem as their capital city. So it's an important religious capital, and it's also an important political capital. But I'll say at this point that as Christadelphians we have no political affiliation with any religious group within, or political group within Israel. But we want to go then into the Bible now and see what there is to say about Jerusalem in the past. And it's incredible just how many times this city appears. First of all, I want to, if you'll join with me, coming to Genesis and chapter 14. But hopefully you can make that out. So we're going to go to Genesis chapter 14. And here we'll see Jerusalem mentioned, but with a slightly different name. And we're in the time of a very faithful man, a man called Abraham. So Genesis 14, we'll come in at verse 17. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him, that's Abraham, after his return from the slaughter of Christadelphian, and of the kings that were with him, at the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's dale. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. So we've seen there that this person called Melchizedek brings out bread and wine to Abraham, but he's described as being the king of Salem. And Salem is the same city that we're talking about this afternoon, that city of Jerusalem. So already, right early on in the Bible, we can see that it's mentioned and it's an important place. Just come on now to the second reference on the screen, which is the 1st of Chronicles chapter 11. And again we'll see here that it's got a slightly different name, but still talking about the same place. So 1st of Chronicles chapter 11. We want to have a look at verse 4. And we'll talk a bit more about this man David in a few moments. But verse 4, and David and all Israel went to Jerusalem, which is Jebus, where the Jebusites were, the inhabitants of the land. So we can see there that it was once known as Jebus, but we can also see from that verse that it's talking about Jerusalem. And another name that I haven't got mentioned on the slides is Zion, which we read in our reading. So a number of different names for this same city of Jerusalem. Now, we've already mentioned Abraham, and I want to have a little bit more of a look at him now. Again, back in Genesis, if you'll come back there. And we'll start to build a picture of just why this city is so important. There's so many different events that take place there. So, first of all, we want to go to Genesis chapter 22, and we're going to find out about Abraham and his command to sacrifice his son Isaac. So Genesis chapter 22, verse 1. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham, and he said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which I will tell thee of. So Abraham is told to take his son up to this land of Moriah. And he's told there that he's going to sacrifice him there on top of that mountain. Later on in the chapter, we find out that, in fact, Abraham didn't have to do that, and the angel stopped him doing so. But it's the place that we're interested in. It's the land of Moriah. And now I want you to come on to the First of Chronicles and chapter 21. So again, somewhere we've just been very close to here. First of Chronicles 21. And this time, we've already mentioned David. We're going to be with him again. So First of Chronicles chapter 21. And we'll read together from verse 22. And David said to Ornan, Grant me the place of this threshing floor, that I may build an altar therein unto the Lord. Thou shalt grant it me for the full price, that the plague may be stayed from the people. So God had brought a plague on the people, and David wants it to be stayed, and so he's going to offer on an altar, and he wants to build it in the threshing floor of this man called Ornan. Verse 23, And Ornan said unto David, Take it to thee, and let my lord the king do that which is good in his eyes. Lo, I give thee oxen also for burnt offerings, and the threshing instruments for wood, and the wheat for the meat offering, I give it all. And so Ornan wants to provide all the things for David, but then we find out, verse 26, David built there an altar unto the Lord, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings, and called upon the Lord, and he answered him from heaven by fire upon the altar of burnt offering. So here David makes a sacrifice, and it's in the place of the threshing floor of Ornan, this man called Ornan. So we've seen Abraham taking Isaac to the land of Moriah. We've got David in the threshing floor of Ornan. And now I want you to just come over to the next book in the Old Testament, the Second of Chronicles, and we're going to have a look at chapter 3, because this verse brings Moriah, it brings the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite, and it brings Jerusalem all together, so we can see what an important place it is. So 2nd of Chronicles chapter 3 and verse 1. Then Solomon began to build the house of the Lord at Jerusalem in Mount Moriah, where the Lord appeared unto David his father, in the place that David had prepared, in the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. So we see there, you've got Jerusalem, in Mount Moriah, which is where Abraham was told to take Isaac. And then it's also the place of the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite, who we've just been looking at with David. And it's in this place of Jerusalem, where Solomon began to build the house of the Lord. So we can see just what an important place it is within the Bible. And it is God's chosen place. I want you to come back now to Deuteronomy, please. And we're going to have a look at chapter 12. Now, God's people haven't always lived dwelt in the land of Israel. They were once slaves in the land of Egypt, and they came out of Egypt and had to conquer the area of Canaan as it was then, or Israel as we know it today. But we find out even before they got there that God had chosen a special place. Just have a look in chapter 12, and we'll have a look at verse 5. But unto the place which the Lord your God shall choose out of all your tribes to put his name there, even unto his habitation shall ye seek, and thither thou shalt come. So there was going to be a place that God has chosen to put his name there. And that same phrase is mentioned throughout the chapter. For example, verse 11. Then there shall be a place which the Lord your God shall choose. Verse 14. But in the place which the Lord shall choose in one of thy tribes. And there are a number more, that's mentioned a number more times as you go through the chapter. So there was a place which God had chosen, even before God's people entered the land of Israel. Now, I should have asked you to keep a finger in 2 Chronicles. I didn't, but we're about to pop back there, so if you wouldn't mind coming with me again. 2 Chronicles chapter 6, because it won't be any surprise to you to find out that the place that God chose was this city and this place of Jerusalem. So we're continuing with Solomon, where we saw that he was building the temple in Jerusalem, and this is what he says. 2 Chronicles chapter 6 verse 20. That thine eyes may be upon this house day and night, upon the place whereof thou hast said that thou wouldest put thy name there, to hearken unto the prayer which thy servant prayeth toward this place. So the place that God had said that he was going to put his name there, which we looked at a number of times in Deuteronomy, was this place, this city of Jerusalem. So we can see that within the Old Testament it's a really important place for God and within the Bible. Now, Jerusalem, there's much has happened in Jerusalem's history. We haven't got time to look at it all. Here's a brief summary. So David captured the city of Jerusalem. Then it was destroyed by the Babylonians. The people of Israel returned from Babylon and rebuilt the city. That was at the time of a man called Nehemiah. And then in AD 70, so after the birth of Jesus and after the death of Jesus, it was then destroyed by the Roman armies. And from that time until now, there's been no one power who's been in control of it for a very long period of time. And so now we're going to look at Jerusalem and what we expect to see, what the Bible tells us will happen in the future. But to do so, we're going to have to look at some prophecies which are in the Old Testament. So come and find with me 2 Samuel chapter 5, please. So 2 Samuel chapter 5, and again we're thinking about this man David. So we'll come in at verse 4 of chapter 5. David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Judah. So when he was king over both Israel and Judah, the two separate parts of the land, he set up in Jerusalem as his place where he would reign from, and he reigned there 33 years. So David was king, and he was king from Jerusalem. Now that's important because I just wanted to come over a couple of chapters now to 2 Samuel chapter 7. And we're going to read here of a great promise that was given to David. And we're going to read from verse 12. And when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build an house for my name. And we've already thought about Solomon and the house which he built in Jerusalem. But this can't be talking about Solomon. I'll read verse 13 again. He shall build an house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commit iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men, and with the stripes of the children of men. But my mercy shall not depart away from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away before thee. And thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. According to all these words, and according to all this vision, so did Nathan speak unto David. So the promise there is given to David of a house being set up which would be established forever. Now we know that that can't be referring to Solomon, because Solomon's reign and Solomon's kingdom came to an end. So who is it talking about? Well, there's a clue there on the screen. We're going to have to go into the New Testament to find out who this person is. So we're going to go to Luke chapter 1, please. And of course, we are looking at the birth of Jesus. So let's just find that out for ourselves. Luke chapter 1, let's have a look at verse 30. And the angel said unto her, Fear not, Mary, for thou hast found favour with God. And behold, thou shalt conceive in thy womb, and bring forth a son, and shalt call his name Jesus. So we're talking here about Jesus. And what's he going to do? Verse 32. He shall be great, and shall be called the Son of the Highest. And the Lord God shall give unto him the throne of his father David. He shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there shall be no end. So that really links us back to what we saw in 2 Samuel with this throne of David, which is going to be established forever. And the person who is going to be reigning on David's throne forever is Jesus. Now, Jesus' followers, his disciples, were keen for this to happen as soon as possible. Let's just come over a few books later on in the New Testament to Acts chapter 1, please. So in Acts chapter 1 we find Jesus just before he ascends into heaven, where he waits now. But his disciples wanted him to set up this kingdom which he's been talking about. They wanted him to set it up right now. Let's just have a look at verse 3. To whom he showed himself alive after his passion by many infallible proofs, being seen of them 40 days, and speaking of the things pertaining to the kingdom of God. So that's Jesus in Jerusalem, reigning forever. Verse 6. When they therefore were come together, they asked of him, saying, Lord, wilt thou at this time restore again the kingdom to Israel? So they want to know, is it going to be now? And of course we are 2,000 years later on, and it wasn't going to be at that time. We are still waiting for Jesus to return and to set up God's kingdom with Jerusalem as the capital. And so that's the hope that the Bible puts before us about Jerusalem, that Jesus will return and set up God's kingdom there. But let's find out a little bit more about it. Let's go and have a look again in the Old Testament at Isaiah, please. Isaiah chapter 2. Things are going to be very different from how we see things round about us now. And this is a vision that Isaiah saw concerning Jerusalem, but at a time future to even us today. So Isaiah chapter 2, and we'll come in at verse 2. And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. So that's got to be talking about a time future to where we are now, because this hasn't happened yet. Verse 3, many people shall go and say, come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. And he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. So that's completely different to the time that we see now, isn't it? Where generally people do as they choose. Here we've got nations choosing to come up to worship God in Jerusalem. And then toward the end of that verse, we saw that out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. So that's where the kingdom, the centre of the kingdom, is going to be. And that's where the laws that the whole earth will be following will be coming from. They will be coming from Jerusalem. So it's going to be a place, a political capital, a place where people are ruled from. Now, we've referred to it briefly there with Isaiah, but it's also going to be a place where people will come and worship. Let's have a look now at Zechariah chapter 14. We're right at the end of your Old Testament, Zechariah chapter 14. And we want to come in at verse 16. And it shall come to pass that every one that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the feast of tabernacles. So there are going to be nations that are going to come against Jerusalem to fight against it. It will turn out that these nations which came to fight against it will come up to worship God there. Verse 17, and it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. So whereas today, if nations choose to do their own thing, it's not really a problem, they get on with it. That's not going to be the case in the kingdom, because if people and nations choose not to come up and worship, well, they're going to be punished. Upon them will be no rain. Then verse 18 carries on. And if the family of Egypt go not up, and come not, that have no rain, there shall be the plague, wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the feast of tabernacles. So they're given the warning, you've not come up, therefore you're not going to get any rain. If even then they don't come up, they're going to be struck with plague. And so, whereas now nations can choose what they want to do, that's not going to be the case. They will have to come up and worship, otherwise they'll be smitten with no rain and plagues. And let's just, we'll read from verses 20 and 21, because they give us a little bit more information. In that day shall there be unto the bells, upon the bells of the horses, holiness to the Lord. And the pots in the Lord's house shall be like the bowls before the altar. Yea, every pot in Jerusalem and in Judah shall be holiness to the Lord of hosts. And all they that sacrifice shall come and take of them, and seed therein. And in that day there shall be no more the Canaanites in the house of the Lord of hosts. So this city, which today is run like most of the cities, and there's all sorts of people in there, at this time that we're looking forward to in the future, everything in Jerusalem and in Judah will be holiness to the Lord of hosts. Another reference I want to look at in Zechariah, just come back a chapter or 6, is Zechariah chapter 8, and we want to have a look at verses 22 and 23. Because part of Jerusalem being the capital, we've also got Israel as God's people, which again is completely different to how we might see it around us at the moment. So Zechariah chapter 8 verses 22 and 23. Yea, many people and strong nations shall come and seek the Lord of hosts in Jerusalem, and to pray before the Lord. And we've already seen that in the other references. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, In those days it shall come to pass that 10 men shall take hold out of all languages of the nations, even shall take hold of the skirt of him that is a Jew, saying, We will go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. So far from being a downtrodden people, a derided people, like they are at the moment, nations of the earth are going to take hold of the skirt of the Jews, God's people, and say, we're going to come with you because we know that God is with you. And of course, they're going to be going up to Jerusalem with them. And so there is a great hope set out in the Bible for the city of Jerusalem. And there is a message for those who would like to be in that future time. Just have a look with me at Isaiah chapter 62. If we accept the message of the Bible, then this is what we should be doing. Isaiah chapter 62. And we'll have a look at verse 6 first of all. I have set watchmen upon thy walls, O Jerusalem, which shall never hold their peace, day nor night. Ye that make mention of the Lord, keep not silence, and give him no rest, till he establish, and till he make Jerusalem a praise in the earth. So if we believe what the Bible tells us about Jerusalem, and what the future holds for it, then that's the message for us. This is a message for us, that we should give God no rest till he establishes, until he makes Jerusalem a praise in the earth. So that's something that we can be thinking about if we have accepted or are going to accept the message of the Bible. Now we took our reading together from Joel chapter 3, and I just want to finish by taking a look at a few verses in that chapter. So Joel chapter 3, tricky one to find at the end of the Old Testament. Got it already. And we're going to see lots of similar ideas that we've been seeing throughout this afternoon's talk, mentioned again here in Joel. So coming in at verse 16, the Lord also shall roar out of Zion, and shall utter his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth shall shake. But the Lord will be the hope of his people, and the strength of the children of Israel. So shall ye know that I am the Lord your God, dwelling in Zion, my holy mountain. Then shall Jerusalem be holy, and there shall no strangers pass through her any more. So it's going to be God's city, a place where God is worshipped, a holy place for him. And then we'll just carry on reading through to the end of the chapter. It shall come to pass in that day that the mountains shall drop with new wine, and the hills shall flow with milk, and all the rivers of Judah shall flow with waters, and a fountain shall come forth of the house of the Lord, and shall water the valley of Shittim. So we've got there an idea of the great blessings that are going to be in the kingdom. Egypt, verse 19, shall be a desolation, and Egypt shall be a desolate wilderness, for the violence against the children of Judah, because they have shed innocent blood in their land. Verse 20, but Judah shall dwell forever, and Jerusalem from generation to generation. For I will cleanse their blood that I have not cleansed, for the Lord dwelleth in Zion. And so that's the hope for Jerusalem, that it will be the future capital of the world. And that's the hope that's set before us if we are willing to take on the message of the Bible. So thanks for your attention.